This is for those that refused to remain down. For those who heard the doubt, felt the weight of resistance, and rose anyway. You were not granted a place at the table. You constructed your own. You did not wait for permission. You have taken your spot. They labeled you reckless. They dubbed you impossible. They said you would not last. And yet, here you are, towering higher than ever as they watch in the shadows. Speechless. This is more than simply a narrative of perseverance. It demonstrates that fate binds those who refuse to break. Every punch is sent your way. Each muttered falsehood. Every skillfully prepared trap is intended to bring you down. Only fed the fire inside. They assumed they were crafting your finale. But all they did was lay the groundwork for your emergence. You didn't just survive. You turned their demise into your legacy. So now, let the whole world watch. Let them study. Every movement, every stride, every unshakable moment. They'll never comprehend how you remained standing. How did you keep winning? Nothing they did could move you. But, you were designed for this selected one. This is how you ended things. They intended it for evil, but God used it for good. Genesis 5020. They constructed their traps like architects of devastation, drawing lines, laying snares, and speaking in the dark as if their words might create your destiny. However, a seed buried in the earth does not perish. It increases. And as they planned your demise, they had no idea they were watering the precise soil that would lead you to rise. They believed their dishonesty would shatter you. They believed their trickery would tie you. They imagined that their designs would confine you to a little, inconsequential location where no one would remember your identity. But what they didn't realize is that you were never playing their game. You were creating your own empire. They cursed you while you were clothed with blessings. They attempted to bring you down, but grace raised you up. They put roadblocks in your way. However, each one became a step that led you farther than they had envisioned. And now they sit in bewilderment, waiting for the verdict. They never expected. You didn't just survive. You expanded. They intended to obliterate you. But their own hands wrote your name in bright writing. They believed they could block out your speech, but all they did was make others question, who is this? They are so afraid because, make no mistake, fear was at the heart of it all. Their obsession, assaults, and eagerness to see you fail had nothing to do with your vulnerability and everything to do with theirs. They never wanted you to rise because they knew once you did, they'd be unable to ignore you again. And now? They are now caught in their own web, entangled in the same falsehoods they told, drained by the weight of their own dishonesty. Meanwhile, you are free, strolling onward, unaffected, untouchable. They started the fire, expecting it would engulf you. However, they were unaware that gold gets purified in the flames. And as others stared from the ashes, wondering what went wrong, you are stronger than ever. No weapon created against you shall succeed, and every mouth spoken against you in judgment will be condemned. Isaiah 5417. They laid the groundwork for your destruction, believing that they were the master strategists, architects, and holders of the blueprint to your ruin. They communicated in private, pulled threads, and moved their pieces like chess players who believed they had complete control over the game. But what they didn't realize was that the game had never been in their hands in the first place. Because the purpose cannot be rewritten, destiny cannot be undone, and a selected one, the chosen one, cannot be prevented. They labored in the shadows, devoting every ounce of their power to your ruin. But they didn't comprehend one thing. Every action they took against you was just another step towards their own demise. They lost their footing as they pushed harder. The deeper they dug, the faster they buried themselves. Because the universe's rules do not favor anybody. They play fairly. What they sent out was returned to them. What they put in motion has now gone full circle. And they lie amid the rubble of their own failed conquest, fatigued, depleted, and groping for power they never actually possessed. You're still here, thriving, rising, evolving. They anticipated revenge. I expected you to hit back, to descend to their level, to throw the same stones as they did at you. However, the selected do not spend their energy fighting fights that are beneath them. You did not need to fight them. You've outlasted them. You did not need to reveal them. They exposed themselves. You did not need to destroy them. They wrecked themselves. And there is the irony. They never planned for the occasion. They assumed they had you cornered the instant they were positive they had won. That was when the tides changed. What they had planned for your failure turned out to be your breakthrough. What they intended to quiet you actually magnified your presence. They thought they were crafting your finale, but all they did was signal the start of your legacy. And now, as they stand amid the ruins, attempting to piece together what went wrong, the reality falls on them like a weight too great to bear. It was never you who faced danger. It was always them. Dear brothers and sisters, may God's peace be with you. Remember this fact. Our lives are based in His divine design that transcends material concerns. As Scripture says, donate, and it will be handed to you. Luke 638. Like a great oak, we remain solid in His might. You may now participate in that blessing by clicking the huge thank you button and donating $100. Know that His fullness will come back to you 100-fold. They anticipated to see you fade and become another victim of their deliberate ruin. Despite the fact that the dust had fallen, you remained standing, unmoved, unchanged. But now the weight of their failure has crushed them instead. They'd seen their techniques work previously. They had seen others crumble, withdraw, and vanish. But this time, their own game worked against them. They based their plans on the assumption that you were like the others. However, they failed to grasp that you were never part of their equation. The fire that was supposed to consume you instead cleaned your path, leaving you stronger than before, untouched by the flames of their labors. And now the unshakable truth lies before them. You were never intended to be deleted. They insulted you openly, criticized you freely, and discarded you without hesitation, knowing that you would eventually fail. However, what they formerly considered entertainment has now become preoccupation. They no longer try to degrade you. They examine you in an attempt to figure out how you outlasted them, how you refused to bend, and how you survived after they had done all in their power to eliminate you. And at that moment of understanding, they are left with just the weight of their own mistake. No weapon made against you will flourish. You will condemn every mouth that comes up against you in judgment. Isaiah 5417. They assembled their troops, honed their weapons, and constructed lofty walls, certain that if they stood together, struck you hard enough, and talked against you long enough, they would be able to rewrite history. But destiny does not respond to fear, and purpose does not yield to those who strive to destroy it. You're not here by chance. You are term selected, appointed for this exact time. A tree planted by the river does not beg for rain, and a lion does not seek permission to roar. The moment they declared war on you, they decided their own destiny. They believed they were silencing you, burying you, and writing your ending. However, all they did was set the ground for your ascension. The more they struggled to eradicate you, the deeper your roots became, and the louder they yelled for your demise. The more hard it got to ignore. Now for those who laughed, those who ridiculed, where are the people who were planning in the shadows? Weaker, exhausted, confused. Their biggest error was assuming that their strength was sufficient to stop what heaven itself had put into action. Their swords turned against them. Their war preparations failed, and the weight of their own objectives destroyed them long before they reached you. They expected you to battle for your position, to prove oneself, beg for the right to exist, but you've never needed their consent. You never had to persuade anybody of who you were. The fever oil is on you, the sort that cannot be stolen, created, or duplicated. They saw your presence as a danger because they knew what you had cannot be purchased, altered, or undone. They saw your silence as capitulation. They misunderstood your forbearance for reluctance. But they failed to see that the struggle was never yours to wage. You stood motionless while the storm passed. You remained unaffected, and their own traps caught them. You refused to shrink, and their own worries consumed them. They didn't fall because you pushed them. They toppled because their own foundation was made of nothing but sand. You're here for a purpose. If you feel called, answer it. Click join to get access to rare information, in-depth insights, and a strong community. This is not just a membership. It is an awakening. Step into your divine mission. Join the chosen. The tables have shifted, not because you struggled for power, but because control was never theirs in the first place. Their voices had vanished. Their authority is shattered. And all that remains is the reality they worked so hard to conceal. You were never intended to be vanquished. And now they're drowning, not by your actions, but through the devastation they created for themselves. They never genuinely fought against you. They fought against a current considerably stronger than themselves. Finally, they gave in. Victory was never about dominating them. It was about surviving long enough to see them crumble under the weight of their own mistakes. And they can feel it now. The weight of defeat, the pain of a conflict they were never prepared to fight. They envisaged a spectacle, seeing you buckling under the weight and hoping to see the result of their devastation in your broken face. Instead, you continued going, serene, unaffected, and unreachable. They waited for despair, confusion, an indication that their assaults had succeeded. But no one arrived. Nothing unsettles them more than this, since the ultimate loss is not being outmatched. It's the realization that you were never a good fit. When the adversary comes in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord will raise a standard against him. Isaiah 5,919. They believed the water would drown you. They believed the wind would rip you apart. They expected the fire to reduce you to nothing but ashes. However, they failed to realize that you were never in danger. It was always them. A stronghold constructed on the rock can endure a storm better than a dwelling built on the sand. It still remains. It survives. It remains. They constructed chaos as a weapon. Believe it will break you. They assembled their armies of deceit. They unleashed wave after wave of attacks, believing that if they only exerted enough pressure, you would disintegrate. However, pressure does not destroy diamonds. It shapes them. So they stared, waiting for fissures to appear. I am waiting for you to stumble, waiting for the time when their machinations would drive you to your knees. But it never arrived. While they battled shadows, they exhausted themselves by weaving falsehoods. They labored tirelessly to design a trap into which you never ventured. You walked ahead unscathed, unfazed, unstoppable. They couldn't grasp it. How? How didn't you break? How did you not flinch? How did you move? With so much certainty? Such elegance? Such heavenly certainty? The solution was easy. The storm was never yours to battle. They believed they were in charge. I thought they were planning something big. They thought they were in control of the result. However, their own annihilation was always part of their designs. Every false remark, dishonest deed, and frantic effort to drag you down was simply another rope tying them to their own demise. Then came the time. They had never anticipated the discovery that you were never in the storm at all. You watched from above as they struggled with their own ideas. You stayed still while they struggled for dominance. You moved in peace as others battled the fight they had made. You've never even taken up a blade. That is what broke them. It was not your revenge. It was your reluctance to interact. They wanted a response. They wanted to fight. They wanted to watch you struggle so that they could believe they had some power over you. However, they never did. And now? They now stand among the rubble of their own creation. The deluge that they threw forth swept over them. The gusts they created knocked them off their feet. The fire they started is searing them instead, since the selected ones do not fall. The selected ones don't shrink. The selected ones don't respond to the upheaval. They stand. They persevere. They ascend. And while the adversary perished in the flames, they made the selected to go through it unharmed. They are now unraveling, caught up in their own fixation. Every step they took was deliberate. Each step is deliberately planned to demolish you. Nonetheless, it was their own actions that precipitated their demise. They predicted the collapse. I expected to see you lose, struggling, defeated. Instead, you adapted to each hurdle you faced. Every barrier, you shifted. They mistook resistance for loss. Never considered that every effort to stop you was merely strengthening your resolve. And the worst part? They were never the creators of your tale. They were only bystanders to a story. They could never rewrite the energy they used to destroy you, only strengthened your climb. And now they're stuck gazing at a conclusion they never expected. The barriers they created to keep you in have become the very foundation, propelling you beyond their grasp. They believed they were building walls. Instead, they were laying the groundwork for something larger than themselves. The rest of the world is not watching them. It's watching you as you go through each test with precision, cut away through obstacles without looking back, and transform every setback into evidence of your power. In them, they are left perplexed, weary by their own efforts, and burdened by the weight of failure. Because nothing worked. All strategies failed. Every frantic effort to pull you back simply shown how unstoppable you are. And now they stand back, watching you climb above the confines they attempted to impose. Forced to acknowledge the reality they used to scoff at. You were never intended to be stopped. Don't be fooled. God is not mocked. Whatever one sows, he will reap. Galatians 6-7. They dug a trench, expecting you to fall into it. They set up a snare, expecting you to walk right into it. But what they didn't realize is that the pit was never designed for you. It was theirs all along. A farmer does not sow thorns and expect flowers. A guy does not hurl stones into the air and expect them not to fall back down. What they sent out was returned to them. And now, as they fumble through the ruins, perplexed and trying to escape the exact havoc they caused, you are nowhere to be found. Walking away was not a surrender. That was a statement. There is no need for words or explanations. You did not argue. I did not plead. Didn't spend your time on discussions that were never going to be won. You've just departed. And that's when everything began to unravel. They had spent so much time and energy attempting to dominate you, creating illusions to keep you tied. However, as you walked away, you carried your power with you. They didn't anticipate that. They believed you would fight, participate, and attempt to prove yourself. However, the selected don't spend time demonstrating what is already known. The weight of your absence struck them harder than any combat could, because for the first time, they had to confront the truth that they had worked so hard to escape. You were never an issue. They were. And now they're suffocating on the smoke from a fire they started themselves. They believed they were planning your collapse, but in reality, they were creating their own finale. You were never involved in their ruin. You were merely the mirror, reflecting it back to them. And the instant you walked out of their tail, their whole house of cards collapsed. They attempted to create their universe around your name, using your presence as the basis for their rule. But when you went, the foundation was gone. What happens to a home without a foundation? It crumbles. You didn't need to push them. You didn't need to battle them. You didn't even need to watch. Because by the time they understood what had occurred, you were too far ahead to hear their fall. And now they are imprisoned in the spiral they constructed, while you march ahead without looking back. Not out of vengeance, not to establish a point, but simply because you never fit in with their mess in the first place. They believed they could trap you in a never-ending cycle of conflict and vengeance. However, the game broke apart the instant you chose to quit. They awaited your response, expected your return, and prepared for another round of their usual ritual. But all they received was silence. And in that quiet, they lost while still entangled in their own maelstrom. You are lifted not by fury, but by the realization that distractions have no weight. Their despair does not reach where you are. They attempted to drag you into the depths, but they didn't understand you were never in the water with them. And now, as they watch from below, fatigued from a fight that only occurred in their imaginations, the reality becomes clear. They tried everything to pull you down, yet you never acknowledged it. The Lord is my rock, stronghold, and deliverer. My God is my rock, in whom I seek shelter. He is my shield, horn of salvation, and fortress. Psalm 18:2. They believed they could shake anything that was constructed on firm ground. They believed they could demolish what was never in their power to destroy. However, a stronghold does not quiver at the sound of the wind. A mountain does not quake as the storm rages. They approached you with flames, confident they could devour you. They set traps, expecting you to walk straight in. They murmured, plotted, and played their games, believing that if they worked hard enough, planned long enough, and flung enough stones, they would be able to bring you down. But how can a wave drown the ocean? How can a shadow contact the sun? They mistaken their own sounds for strength. They assumed that if they continued pressing, you would give in. That if they continued flinging assaults, something will eventually land. However, all they did was tire themselves, fighting a conflict they were never supposed to win. Because as they battled, you stayed still as they attempted to drag you into pandemonium. You moved peacefully as others struggled for control. You never grabbed for it because control was never theirs to have. And now the battleground is vacant. The voices that formerly cried out against you have quieted. The hands that attempted to knock you down are trembling not from force, but from the understanding that they were defeated before they ever started. They battled against something they didn't understand. They felt that if they could ruin your name, they could undo your fate. But they neglected one thing. Man cannot offer or steal favors. You never fought them. You were merely strolling ahead while they burnt out and chased shadows. And now that the dust has settled, all that remains is the truth. You're still standing. You're still flourishing. You are still unharmed. They fought battle. In the end, they simply conquered themselves. They are now left with just the knowledge that their war was worthless. Their battle was hopeless, and their efforts to undermine you exposed their own vulnerability. That's the truth. That will continue to haunt them. It's not the loss that hurts. It's the understanding that you never saw them as an opponent. They wanted you to stumble, harden with resentment, and bear the consequences of their deeds like shackles around your ankles. Instead, you stayed light, untouched, and unattached to the destruction they attempted to produce. And this is something they will never comprehend. They committed themselves to shattering you, but they never wondered why nothing appeared to affect you. Why did you continue to move with clarity? Why has your presence stayed radiant? Why their best efforts were unable to destabilize your foundation? They believed they could draw you into their disarray, drive you into a zone of ruin, and drag you into the mess in which they flourish. They didn't comprehend you were never in the same arena. You've never played their game. And while they were looking for methods to knock you down, you were already creating something much better, something they were never intended to become. Part of the stone the builders rejected has now become the cornerstone. Psalm 118, verse 22. They took one glance at you and determined you were not a danger. They felt that if they ignored you long enough, rejected you, or muttered just enough falsehoods, they could influence how your narrative was recounted. But they made one critical error. They forgot that the purpose did not need approval. They misinterpreted your silence for capitulation and your humility for insignificance. They assumed you were waiting for a place at their table, not understanding you were creating something bigger than their whole new country. Because you were never supposed to fit into their world. You were supposed to modify it. And now, when you enter a room, people feel it. A presence. They cannot specify a weight. They can't explain. Something about you bothers them, but they won't say it out loud. They do not know why, but their spirit understands. You do not belong in their system, structure, or method of doing things. They struggled for prestige, twisted for power, and battled for recognition. And yet, there you are, undisturbed, undamaged, unshaken, never having to play their game since what they needed to seek flows through you naturally. They attempted to destabilize your foundation, certain that enough pressure, slander, and deception would force you to crumble. However, a tree with deep roots does not fear the storm. So they waited, looking for indications of struggle, a moment of weakness, and confirmation that they had some control. But the evidence never arrived because there was never a war. It was an illusion. They weren't tugging the strings. They were not plotting your ruin. They were merely spectators squandering their energy by battling something that was never within their reach. And now all they have is the weight of their own mistakes. They rejected you, only to discover you were the cornerstone. They attempted to eliminate you, only to discover your existence everywhere. They spent their time conspiring against you, only to wake up one day and discover you had already won. They clung to the illusion that they were in charge. They had no idea they were battling against themselves all along. The walls they created to entrap you were the obstacles that kept them captive. The mayhem they created devoured them completely. They lost, not because you overcame them, but because they were never powerful enough to bring you down in the first place. And now, when they look about at the carnage they created, there is only one fact they can't ignore. They poured everything into your demise, only to self-destruct in the process. You never had to retaliate. You never had to justify yourself while they plummeted. You kept calm while they yelled for attention. You walked silently while they played their games. You went ahead, unaffected by the noise. They wanted to see your struggle. I expected to see you collapse. I'd hoped to see your destruction. Instead, you grinned, not in arrogance or disobedience, but in peace. That's the one thing they'll never recover from.